National Puerto Rican Bar Association, established to meet the question on a national basis, what is Puerto Rico? A nation, a state, or something in between? Join the conversation every week right here. Welcome, everybody. This is Tony Suarez, and I am your host of Equal Justice on a podcast of the Puerto Rican Bar Association, actually a National Puerto Rican Bar Association conference. And with me is my co-host, Steve Alsina, the voice of the people, and who tries to keep us lawyers simple and honest, which is a difficult thing to do in today's environment. But obviously, he's to try to calm us out. Calm down the rhetoric when the lawyers just get too technical, and we've already had a couple of shows where it got quite technical.
And we had to start doing.
And this is not going to be that's technical because this show we have a very special guest star, star. He is a star who is joining us from Puerto Rico and who's taking time out to discuss with us and get this word out about what's going on the political ramifications of what is called political gerrymandering. So let us please welcome Representative Darren Soto, District 8. Welcome, Darren. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
Tony, Steve, thanks for having me.
Okay.
Welcome.
And I've introduced you to Steve off the air, and like I indicated, that Steve is there to keep us grounded as you and I go off on the deep end trying to describe a very, very complex issue for the people of the United States, really, because this is not easy. And so you know how difficult it is. Part of what I do at the law school is teach. This is a course in law school. And the Voting Rights Act and all the ramifications of the Voting Rights Act is all part of a law school curriculum. So imagine if it's difficult for lawyers to learn and understand how difficult it would be for everyone else out there what's going on. So let's introduce a little bit about Representative Darren Soto, District 8. He's been in the House now 9 years.
District 9.
District 9. And before that, he was the first Puerto Rican state senator. And then before that, he was in House of Representatives in the state of Florida. He was a practicing attorney. Now he's practicing being an attorney in Washington, D.C., which I would say not an easy task because there's breaking so many laws over there that it's not sure what they're doing over there. But nonetheless, it is a difficult task to be a lawyer, to know what the Constitution says and see what's going on in Washington, D.C. So I'd like to get your impressions of what's going on too, because it's got to be difficult knowing what's going on and then seeing just the brazen disregard for what law and order is, and that's what we're having. So welcome, Representative. Thank you once again for coming. I introduced you to Steve. Steve is our voice of the people. And first, I understand you're in Puerto Rico. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm visiting our brothers and sisters on the island. There's a lot of both campaigning and business work to do for the people, and so I'll be hearing from folks on the water issues they have down here, as well as the Medicaid issue that we've been working on to make sure they have equal funding. But I'll be back home, don't worry, by this weekend, and continue to do the people's business.
By the way, so everyone's listening, we are live on Facebook, but at YouTube. This will eventually be on YouTube and will be on our website as well. I'm announcing the website underneath as we prepare for the national conference, which will be in September, of the Puerto Rican Bar Association's national conference, which combines the Puerto Rican bars of New York, Florida, Illinois, and Puerto Rico, in attempting to bring attention to the issue, which is what is so important, because what many people may not know, and I try to make an emphasis of this every time I'm on the show, Representative, is that while in law school, you learn Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 of the Constitution. You spend all the time on the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment, Second Amendment. What we never spend any time on is the territorial clause. No, nobody knows what that means. And so, and that is the clause where Puerto Rico is being governed under, right? And so what we're trying to do is bring attention to the issue. No bar association, I want to make clear, none of the bar association participating in this take a position on what Puerto Rico should be, whether it be an independent country or a state or something in between. But what we all do agree is that something has to change, and it has to come from Congress, because nothing that the Puerto Ricans themselves vote on means anything. It has to come from Congress, and the person, the voice of Puerto Rico, and for that point of view in the nation is Darren Soto. Right? It's his bill. It's his attempts. It's almost like a Soto, because he's even fighting among the other Puerto Ricans, representatives. But it's his amazing attempt to get his bill on the agenda so it can be voted, so Puerto Ricans will eventually have a chance. He's doing the yeoman job, and I would wonder if you could give us your breakdown of what you're trying to do with the bill.
So first of all, the Puerto Rico Status Act passed out of the U.S. House all the way last term. It was it took us all 2 years to do it. It was negotiated between myself and then Resident Commissioner Gonzalez Colon and Governor Perluisi at the time, AOC, Nydia Velasquez. We had all the Puerto Ricans in one room, and it included both statehood, independence, and free association, which is independence with a relationship to the United States. And while it passed the U.S. House, it never passed the Senate. Oh, the Senate, they're always the tough ones. They haven't admitted new members to the Senate in a long time, and so we have work to do. This term, it's been slow going, obviously, because we have a trifecta on the Republican side who many of them oppose it. We do have some supporters on the Republican side, but many of them voted against the PR Status Act and have not wanted a hearing on it. We do have some allies, though, on the island with the governor and some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. So it would be tough to get something moving this term, but we will continue to work with the Natural Resources Committee to try to do that. And in addition, obviously, we're working on as pressing issues right now with the Medicaid issue and also the restoring the grid and the water issue that's cropped up down here as well. So a lot of issues on our plate, but long term, this is a fight for equality, and it's one that I'm committed to.
Yeah. So we're clear. I mean, what he's basically said, again, this is where you were supposed to jump in here, Steve. Okay. Okay. The Puerto Rico Status Act, getting it through requires not only majority in Congress, you need to have the Senate pass it as well. Then it's got to go to the president, right? So he managed to get it through the House 1 year, but it was the last day of the year, didn't get to the Senate. It doesn't become bill. So now he's working, rather than working on the overall Status Act, he's working on individual problems of Puerto Rico, like the Medicaid, right? So he's tackling the problem piecemeal to try to solve some of the inequities, the unequalness of Puerto Rico. So that's what he's doing right now. Not that he's given up on the dream, but that he's working it at a different angle, knowing that Cuba is going to be the 51st state, or Venezuela is going to be the 51st state, or Canada is going to be the 51st state before Puerto Rico will become the 51st state. So what's what's great about me already? I no longer care about what people think, Darren. I can now say, go sin pelo en la lengua, which is one of the shows that we do on Tuesday mornings. But anyway, this is what he's trying to do. But the ultimate goal of what the Puerto Rican Bar Association Conference is not only an enhancement of lawyers' personal, crecimiento, our knowledge, taking classes and CLE courses, and networking, which is important. All of us have clients across jurisdictions, but we also support the moot court, and that is coming up soon. In September, we will have the moot court competition, which is inviting schools from around the country. We've invited 60 schools. And while you're there in Puerto Rico, by the way, mention it to the law schools over there. I'm still waiting for them to give me a call, okay? To participate. So just a little push over there to the schools in Puerto Rico, so that we will have a debate. We will create a cadre of people around the country, because as we indicated earlier, right? You study the Constitution in law school, but you never study the territorial clause. So no one knows this. Now, no one knows about the status of Puerto Rico. We have to educate everybody. And I know that when the representative goes to Montana or Utah and he talks to the people about Puerto Rico, they ask him, what kind of money? Do we need a passport? What's the foreign exchange rate? They come with all sorts of stuff that they really know nothing about Puerto Rico. And it takes time. And so while the moot court doesn't expect to change anybody's mind today, we're hoping in several years we will have created a cadre of people from around the country who understand the issue. And our representative here was so kind to offer the opportunity that the winning team will be able to go to Washington, D.C. and address the Congress on this issue. And that is a tremendous, tremendous benefit for the students. It's not just a moot court. It's something much bigger than that. Yes, Steve.
Thank you. I didn't say nothing because he was already so eloquent explaining so I didn't see the need for me to interject. But now that I hear that the winner of the moot competition is going to be Darren Soto, is going to bring it to the big house, that is very cool.
That's heavy. That's heavy duty. So that's just a trophy, right? It's not just a trophy. That's cool. No, it's really a big benefit, and I'm really looking forward that is a special gift.
And Steve,
yes,
I can tell you, while we get to lead a lot of the region and the nation now, it won't be forever, and so we need to train that next generation.
Right.
Those law students that Tony's teaching. So I'm thrilled to be able to support them, encourage them to develop their advocacy skills, learn their craft, and one day they'll be in charge. Not yet, but one day we need to make sure we're educating and mentoring the next generation.
And that's also why Tony and I are doing this. But let me ask you a question. You bring in that winner, that trophy holder from this moot competition to the big house. Are they going to be able to state the case?
So I know they'll be able to advocate to me, and I'll see if we might be able to get a member to join me to allow them to make their arguments. And certainly there'll be staff members of different offices there as well. So there'll be there'll be some policymakers and definitely some of their teams that they'll be able to present in front of. And we've hosted folks before on some of these different issues, and we want to elevate our young people. It's the same reason I have a pretty strong internship program. We have easily a half a dozen to a dozen kids every 3 months because we need to train the next generation of Floridians, Central Floridians who understand the federal process and can navigate it. That brings dividends back to our community and to the Puerto Rican diaspora at large, because whether you're working as a reporter or as a law school professor, as an administrator, as a business leader, a nonprofit leader, or crazy enough to run for office yourself, these skills can be very helpful navigating through, especially the funding that comes down from the federal government can make or break different issues. And then there's always rules on things that it's helpful to know the laws.
Well, you're here with us, and the gentleman who invited you, Mr. Anthony Tony Suarez, Esquire, he was one of the trade centers. He was the one who put the first few steps over in Tallahassee as a Puerto Rican.
Absolutely. The first Puerto Rican state house member, if I remember correctly, right?
That's right. Let's not forget pioneers.
Oh, I know. I know my history.
Well,
Robert Guevara were the original seeds. Robert in the county commission and him in the state house.
Yeah.
So let's get to the issue at hand, because we've done some background stuff. I'm also putting up an email address of those people who would like to send some information to not to the Puerto Rican bar, but for me as a professor at the law school, looking at that. But let's talk about the complex issue that has the Civil Rights Act, right? The Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the political gerrymandering, which has now been pretty much, you could say, eliminated or justicial out by judicial decision of the Supreme Court, which now has eliminated some of the sections. The Voting Rights Act, just so some background, okay, for people. The Voting Rights Act was created in 1965 in order to refix the problems that we had of some what we call Jim Crow laws, or laws that prohibited people of color from being able to register to vote. So while we had won the Civil War and we eliminated slavery, the laws of how to vote, which are done by states, right? Those laws were created in such a difficult way that African Americans, while eligible to vote, could not vote because the rules were made so difficult by the states. So while you'll have people showing up, they had to take a test. For example, that was pages long in order to be able to qualify to vote, or they had to pay a tax in order to vote. So the Voting Rights Act was created in order to eliminate that, to eliminate those Jim Crow laws, to allow easier voting, and also put in place sort of a check and balance. They wanted the federal government to check those states which had previously had Jim Crow laws, and they had to check. So that was called pre-clearance. There was a pre-clearance requirement of certain states in the South, right, that had to clear any changes in the voting laws with the Department of Justice. That has been stricken down, and that was struck out in 2013, Shelby versus Holder. Shelby County versus Holder. Then there was recently a decision that just even did away with any race-based election. That is, if you created a district, previously was created a district for whites, eliminating blacks, that would be considered illegal. But now if you create a district for blacks, which might exclude whites, that's going to be illegal. So now it's up in the air, and the states go back to doing whatever they did before. And we now know that all the states in the South have taken advantage of the decisions and have been redrawing their districts in order to create a new Republican majority as they perceive it. So now that background gets to the case of Representative Soto, who had a district that was heavily based with Hispanics. And they seem to have gerrymandered his district to reduce his base. And the reason they're saying the reason is to make it more Republican, which the Supreme Court said it's okay to do that. You can do gerrymandering for political reasons, but you can't do it for racial reasons.
It doesn't.
So, Congressman, having said all of that, tell me what you're seeing in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to get your perspective on the fact that your district has been redrawn.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Steve. So this gerrymandering war has been a cancer on our democracy. Rather than run on ideas on who has the best vision for America, we've seen, sadly, some Republicans, through the courts, through their state legislators, draw gerrymandered partisan maps. And there are a few rules in play here that have changed recently or have been ignored. So first, on the federal level, you were mentioning the Voting Rights Act requiring if you have a certain size of minority groups who can have their own district.
We have apparently lost Mr. Soto.
Oh, he fell out. He fell out.
Something happened. But we'll get him in there, not a problem.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll do it
because he was coming in with the good stuff.
Yeah, he was.
Then all of a sudden, boom.
He was about to explain what I was saying, and then when he gets back, okay, I'm going to show him that little map that I showed you to try to explain gerrymandering. Now, Steve, I caution you. Here we go. He's coming in again. That it gets complex. So please, when I start mumbling too much legalese, you jump in there and stop me. Okay.
Yeah, just make sure that you direct the chart that you're speaking about.
Okay.
So that way we can all understand and I don't have
Yeah.
to interrupt.
Yeah. I think that I'll take this minute to get. Well, there he is again.
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead.
There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go.
You're hanging
I'm on
on
my
us.
cell phone and I got a phone call. So
Oh,
moving back to it. So
All
you
right.
gotta you gotta on the
Go ahead.
federal level, you have the Voting Rights Act that required certain minority districts to be drawn if there was a certain size population, especially with discrimination of African Americans and some Hispanics throughout the South. The Supreme Court technically did not get rid of the VRA. They just said, you know what? VRA still stands, but if you're just doing it for partisan purposes, you're allowed to do that. So they've created this giant exception, especially when most African Americans vote Democratic in the South, and Hispanics were all over the place on this. So it's a little different. And then some Anglos, not all, vote Republican in the South, and so this has allowed for questionable maps in Tennessee, in Louisiana, Alabama. In our state, it's a little more complicated than that because the voters, by a majority, voted to have fair district amendments, which specifically banned partisan gerrymandering and disfavoring incumbents and saying you had to keep counties and cities together, that these districts had to be compact. And the governor and the legislature just threw all that out the window, drew a map that even the map maker said was partisan, and then the courts did nothing.
Nothing. The Supreme Court refused to even hear the case.
You had the trial judge who said, well, because there's this open-ended case down in Miami, he said that the current map, which we were in, and the Supreme Court literally ratified 3 years ago. Well, that's illegal now, and so we got to go with this new map. And if it's the difference between racial gerrymandering, which it was never proven to be racial gerrymandering, and partisan gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering isn't that big of a deal. And then the Supreme Court just punted it and said, oh, it's the First Circuit. So literally we have courts who ignored the Constitution and then just shrug their hands and are like, oh, it's too late. I mean, we would chastise other countries as this being blatant corruption, right? Now, that being said, what's done is done, at least for this cycle. And, so 58% of the current district is in the new district. 4 new counties are added. And it's really now 3 different areas. You have Central Florida, the Heartland, places like Glades County and Highlands and Okeechobee. You have coastal areas like Indian River. Yes, there was about 50% Hispanic population in the current district. It goes down to about a third. You also have large African American, Native American, and South Asian communities there. But look, now, if you can't beat them at the courts, you got to beat them at the ballot box. And so we have been on tour all throughout a lot of those areas, meeting with local ranchers and farmers, meeting with our local workers in places like Indian River. And, it's going to be a close race. I'm not going to get too into the politics and polling of it, but it's going to be a very competitive race. And I could tell you they split the Hispanic community, predominantly Puerto Rican, into 5 districts in this new map. You got some in East Orlando that'll be split into a Brevard-based seat. You got some in North Downtown that'll be in a Volusia-based seat. You'll have some as near to my house, and I live in Kissimmee, as Hunters Creek, that may be represented by someone as far off as the Villages. And so and then folks in Poinciana represented with folks in Polk County. But if you live in South Orange, in neighborhoods like Lake Nona, Meadowwoods, and Taft, Belle Isle, Edgewood, or Conway, those are still in the new 9th Congressional District. All of Osceola, other than Poinciana and half the Celebration, are in the new 9th congressional district and these 4 new counties that were added. I'm very familiar with working with the ag community, so we've had some very positive meetings down there, and folks know my history there. And then learning Indian River County, we've worked a lot on coastal issues, including my coastal reef bill that I passed with Marco Rubio. You probably heard of that guy a while ago, as well as work to restore the Indian River Lagoon through funding. So at this point, now the case has to be made. The last thing I'll say is, whether you're Hispanic or not, as a Central Floridian, they're going after the 3 major economic areas of the state with this map. They try to blow Central Florida apart, Tampa Bay apart, and South Florida, even though we are more than half the economic activity of the state. The second most sales tax is generated in Orange County, Florida, after Miami-Dade, and then Hillsborough is right behind it. So, and I only mention sales tax because the state is literally funded on sales tax mostly. And so if you're a Central Floridian, they're trying to tear our delegation apart. And we have one of the fastest growing areas in the nation. I spent the last 10 years bringing billions back for jobs like in Lake Nona and Neo City, for hundreds of millions of dollars for our Orlando International Airport, for Terminal C, for expanding I-4. That was a $3.4 billion project. For the Sunrail Brightline expansion we're working on. And look, we have a lot of growth. If we don't have folks, a strong delegation that could bring back the funding that is needed, we will suffer as a community, our economy, our way of life. And so this is really an attack on every Central Floridian, as well as folks in South Florida, as well as folks in Tampa Bay, because it's dividing up these major urban areas that are integral to our economy. And so a lot there. And I'll be on the campaign trail making my case, and of course, counting on Central Floridians to come out in force.
Let me go ahead, Steve. Go ahead. Ask the question, because I want to get some deep weeds here. Go ahead.
Okay. So you're telling me that there's a part of Orlando that's also including Brevard County as the division of a district. Even Brevard County is separate from Orange County, because I am in Brevard County. Okay, so we don't hear from nobody in Orlando. We don't. It's us over here. So now you're telling me that they are extending and gerrymandering an area that will include Brevard County.
Brevard County-based seat will include East Orlando and UCF now.
Really?
All right. And it'll probably still be a Brevard County member, but now the folks of East Orlando will probably be deprioritized because people, a lot of folks focus on their home areas, right? And and then the same thing with most of West Orange County and South Orange County will be probably represented by someone from the villages, 2 counties north of there. I'll give you an odd example. So Hunters Creek is literally 3 miles from my house, right? It's right across the street from the loop. And that'll be represented by someone who probably is 40, 50, 60 miles away or more.
Wow.
Even though they're my neighbors, right?
You see what he's talking about? You're drawing. I'm going to go into a little map now to try to visualize so people can understand that, right? But before I get into the visualization, so he just made it. The district in Kissimmee is going to be represented by someone who lives in the villages. Why? Because the villages have more people than the people in the southern part of that district, and therefore, if they vote consistently, the likelihood that a representative comes out from the villages is more likely than somebody comes from Kissimmee. This is the gamble that the legislature is putting into trying to break up the district and break up this voting block. And because the Supreme Court, let me put up their image here, because the Supreme Court has said political gerrymandering is okay, but you cannot racially, you can't say this is for white people. You can't say this is for Puerto Ricans, but just say for Democrats or for Republicans, yeah, that's okay. The problem comes in is that if all the African Americans are Democrats, then all you don't have to do is put Democrats in one area, and what's called, bunch them up or split them up. Crack or pack is a language that's used in the litigation. You either crack the districts or pack the districts. And what the representative just told us is that they took the Latino vote, mostly Puerto Rican, and cracked it into 5. That's what they did in order to weaken the vote of the people, the Puerto Rican people. But what they've done is put Puerto Ricans everywhere. All right. So now, if the Puerto Ricans come out to vote at a greater percentage than anyone else, well, you know what? You may end up having with 5 Puerto Rican legislators. That could be a potential. We call that dummy mandering, right? But I want to get into something more philosophical question. You're going to go into the technical because we have to, because I'm a law professor, right? But you know, Darren, one of the things I was just being interviewed by a reporter from Philadelphia, and I said, "What do you think about, you know, representative district being cracked up?" And I said, Darren Soto could represent anybody, white people, black people, brown people. He's articulate, bright, intelligent. He doesn't have to have only Puerto Ricans in his district in order to win an election. And I think one of the things that offended me when I was elected in a House district that was mostly Republican and mostly white was they presumed that I must have come from a minority district. You know, no, I could represent white people. It's okay, you know. And I think that we often forget that as an issue, that they are very well qualified minority people who can run in districts where they're not the majority. And Barack Obama won the United States of America. All right, and we've had senators, African American senators, run statewide where the blacks do not constitute the majority of the people. So this is it's a mistake, in my opinion, to say that, oh, we have to run in only Puerto Rican districts because we could only represent Puerto Ricans, or you know. So I know that you feel that because I know you personally. I know your history for many years, and I know you're extremely qualified to represent anybody, as is Hakeem Jeffries, qualified to represent anybody. These are articulate, bright people who happen to be Puerto Rican, happen to be black, but they happen to be also a very intelligent, bright people that can represent anybody. So he does not have to be afraid of running in with white people because he can talk to them. Go ahead, Steve.
And just to add to, you know, piggyback out of that, you know, this is not about white, black, or pink. This is about people. This is about us. This is about having representation. Okay, who cares what color you are? We all bleed red. You know, the important thing here is to be able to get representatives out there that are for the people, not to milk and take advantage of the people. And that's where the difference is. It doesn't matter if it's white, burgundy, black, blue, Puerto Rican, non-Mexican, you know, whatever the situation might be. It does not matter. It's about getting our representatives, regardless, same thing. It doesn't have to be Darren Soto because he's Puerto Rican, you know, to represent that. It could be anybody. The thing is to have the dedication that Darren has to be able to go in there and not get paid like many of them do, okay, and enjoy vacations, you know, for months, okay, while we waiting for a vote to pass something that is just common sense, okay? And I'm just going to stop it there because we're going to go to another road that I don't want to go to.
And if I may just add, I've been, obviously I've represented a lot of rural areas already. I've had half of Polk County in the district. A lot of Osceola is very rural. So I could tell you, going to a lot of the rural areas, they're very familiar to areas I already represent. So I've been a close ally with our local growers, ranchers, farmers for a long time. And so the heartland area of the district, I mentioned, it's really 3 mini districts, is an area I'm very familiar with because I already have part of that area and have for over a decade in Congress. And, you know, just 2 weeks ago, last week, I got to file a big bill with the Republican Ag Chairman to help promote WIC benefits for orange juice, as an example of work that we're doing lately. And we're working on a screwworm has been a huge attack on our cows and our ranches potentially, and so that's something we're working very closely on. And then on coastal issues, I've worked on them before I ever had the coast, because it's every Floridian enjoys being on the coast. I didn't have to be part of Brevard County, Steve, to know that the coast was important, which is why I was proud to pass the biggest coral reef restoration bill in decades, a bipartisan bill with Senator Rubio, and work on the Indian River Lagoon before it was ever in our district, along with space issues in Brevard that I know we all care deeply about. So I agree 100%, Tony, and I am doing my best to make the case to everybody. And the good news is a lot of current constituents are having a lot of conversations with potential new constituents about the fact that I'm hardworking, I know my stuff, and I have had a record of delivering for our constituents, and that has been something that we've seen thankfully precede us in a lot of places, and I'm looking forward to continue to get out on the campaign trail and work with current constituents and potential new ones.
All right, let me take you into put my law professor hat back on, and you as your lawyer hat on, but the guy on the inside who knows you've involved in redistricting, you did redistricting when you were in the state level, and now you're affected by it at the federal level. Let's try to, without getting lost in the weeds here, okay, which is difficult. What is gerrymandering? We talked about districting, so I'm going to put up a map, and then we're going to try to talk about it. See, that's not the right map. What happened here? There, that one. All right. So what this map explains for those who are watching is a congressional district. It says that for a state with 50 congressional districts, of which 60% vote Democrat and 40% vote Republican. That's the first box. All right. And the boxes represent the areas or precincts that the state votes in. So now, if you divide the state with the lines in the box in the middle, and it's just across the top, across the line, horizontal, vertical lines. If you do these vertical lines, you get, not vertical, horizontal lines. You get the horizontal lines. You will get 5 districts for Democrats and 0 districts for Republicans if you draw it that way. All right. So you put all these counties together, and you put these counties together, and then you put these counties together. You put them this way, and the result will be, if everyone votes Democrat, who's a Democrat, and everybody's Republican, who's a Republican, assuming that, right? Assuming that, then you will get 5 Democrats and 0 Republicans. But if you draw these districts a line along the black lines here, this way, okay? You draw them this way, then the result will be with 3 seats for Republicans and 2 seats for Democrats. Nothing's changed. 60% of the precincts vote Democratic, but you're only getting 2 representatives instead of 5 representatives. Okay, so that's how you do it, by drawing the lines in a way, stretching them all out. Now, they used to do that to represent black districts or to exclude black states, right? Doing these lines by putting in black districts or putting Latino districts, clunching them, or called packing them or cracking them, and that's why they can affect the map. But this is what's called gerrymandering. I think if you could spend a couple of minutes try to unravel that for me, Representative.
Sure, absolutely. I think at its basis form, it's drawing districts that are way out of whack with the registration of a state or the demographics of a state, right? In Florida, 40% of Floridians are Republican, 30% are Democrat, and another 30% are independent. Yet we have a 8-20 split right now, which is way out of whack between 40, 30, and 30. And remember, your maps don't even show all the independents. That's 30% of Floridians, right? Like, Tony, you're probably one of those folks, right? You're not even on that map there, right?
Exactly.
and so whenever you get a map that is way out of whack with the registration, as an example, where it's not like we're a majority of Floridians are even Republican. Only 40% are, right? And there are 30% Democrat and there are 30% independent. But you could draw them in a way where you maximize having that 40% in each district. And on top of that, Democrats tend to live more in suburbs and urban areas, and not all, but Republicans tend to live in exurban and rural areas. There's exceptions on both sides of that, right? Of course, but that's general trend. So you can cut cities up in 4 ways and basically disenfranchise easily 1 million people that way or more, right? And then you look at the diversity of the state. The state is nearly a majority minority state, right? And so making sure that it at least has some reflection of that is something that the Voting Rights Act sought to achieve. Now there's a big attempt to try to undermine that through the partisanship exception to the VRA that the Supreme Court just created. And so, but the bottom line is it means it's an unfair map. It's a map where politicians are trying to choose their voters rather than voters try to choose their elected officials, where the ideas aren't as important as, at least the hope is that the ideas aren't as important as the party affiliation. I will say, though, and you mentioned Gerrymandering a couple times, sometimes you could try to do this, but in a year like this, with the status quo, and the Dems may have a good year where we might be able to take back the House. That could blow up on you in some of these seats, as you have in the past special elections. You had independents go 2/3 voting for Democrats in the last couple special elections in Florida, and 8 to 10% of Republicans voting for the Democratic candidate because they're looking for balance back in government. Because right now it's so lopsided, and we're seeing the problems of that. And so you could see issues with that. And I think you're going to see a lot of competitive seats for at least this election cycle because of the fact that people are upset because the costs are rising, the economy is struggling. 2 million Floridians lost their health care because the ACA tax credit ended. And folks are upset with corruption, which Steve has mentioned on multiple occasions, right? And so, these are all issues that even if you try to mess with the maps, can blow up in the short term. In the long term, though, it is trying to stack the deck in the favor of one party over another. And in a state where it's 40, 30, 30, that's wrong and that's unfair. And Floridians voted to stop that from happening. And the courts have just sat on their hands and let it happen. And now, if you can't beat them at the courts, you got to beat them at the ballot box. And so that's where we're at now. And we'll be, doing everything we can to get out the message.
All right, Steve, I guess you're going to give us a passing grade or not, because if you understood all that, you're the man. Okay. All right. And you prove that we can do it.
I really want to put you both in the spot. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and feel free to do that. Excuse me. But with everything that is going on in our government, with this gerrymandering, the base of the Republican Party, the actual precedent that we have, everything that has happened, okay, the new midterm elections that we have coming now in November, in a couple of months, in a blink of an eye, okay, are we going to be able to repair the damage not only in the federal ambience, but in the local, okay, because there's been a lot of people affected throughout the United States, okay, it's not just a few. It's a whole lot of people. I mean, so my question to both of you is, what is to be expected from this point on? Are we going to be able to fix what has been damaged, or are we just going to continue making it worse? And so feel free to answer however you want to, in New York.
I'm happy to take it on from a policy point of view. I'll briefly address the court stuff, then I'll let Tony have the last word on that. And that'll have to be my last question because they're keeping me popping today. But Steve, that is a great question. First, look, there are many things that are hurting Americans right now. The tariffs are hurting Americans, and we need to address those, and we can through the next Congress should we have more balance. We have a war in Iran that is raising gasoline and fertilizer prices and hurting a lot of Floridians. We have to wind that down in the right way. We have to fix this huge loss of healthcare that over 2 million Floridians are facing right now. The ACA tax credits, the Medicaid cuts we have to address because it's really detrimentally hurting our health system, and people are suffering, right? In addition, with corruption, we see ballrooms and billion-dollar pay-to-play pardon schemes, insider contracts with well-heeled folks who have a close relationship with the president, right?
Government.
There needs to be accountability, and we're not seeing that right now by this Congress, right? So all those things raise prices, all those things hurt faith in government. And in the case of healthcare, people get sick, people die without health insurance. And so that isn't everything, but those are some things that even with a divided government we could fix, because most of those are either oversight or in the budget. It's harder in divided government to pass new laws, but there are some new laws that we need to work on in a bipartisan fashion. A new farm bill. We need a new infrastructure law. We need a housing bill to help out with affordable housing. These are things that the Congress could work together to pass, and I'm hopeful that we are. And I'm voting for these things in a bipartisan fashion to move them along. But those would be some of the things we could do with more balance in the government, and some things law-wise that we could do together. On the court side, this was a denial of an initial injunction. There'll be a full trial on this gerrymandered map. It just won't affect this election. So we'll run in what is highly likely to be an unconstitutional map, at least in my legal opinion. And many people who are just simply have eyes and can read when it says thou shall not favor or disfavor a party or incumbent is the first line of the Constitution. That means you can't gerrymander, right? But we'll see where that goes. I want to give the last word to Tony on that, on the court stuff. And I just appreciate y'all having me today.
No, actually, well, I want to appreciate that first because it's really running out of time. I know we took much of your time that you were in Puerto Rico, and this topic was heavy, and we may address it in the future again. But I want to make sure that everyone understands that Darren Soto is extremely qualified to represent anybody in the state of Florida, and doesn't have to have a district that's only majority Hispanic, although we love to have someone who understands our culture in there. But nonetheless, as he indicated, the battle is in the streets, the battle is in the box. We have to come out to vote. And if we're lucky, we'll elect a couple of Puerto Ricans to the House of Representatives. I want to thank you, Representative Darren Soto, District 9, and thank you for coming along. And I look forward to seeing you at Moot Court.
Sounds great. We welcome those bright students who win the competition. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Steve.
God bless.
Thank you.
See ya. God bless you.
Have a good day.